So, you think you know your favorite candy bar? Well, today in this explainer, we're diving deep into the chemistry, the history, and the geography behind the incredibly vast and delicious world of chocolate. Trust me, by the time we're done here, you are going to look at that candy aisle in a totally new light.
Because long before it was a sweet treat wrapped in shiny foil, chocolate was, well, a wildly different commodity. The Olmecs started cultivating the cacao tree in Mesoamerica way back around 1500 BCE. And it was so incredibly valuable to empires like the Mayans and the Aztecs that it wasn't just a midday snack, it was literally money. Seriously, imagine buying your weekly groceries with handfuls of beans.
Okay, so to make sense of all this, we'll structure our journey into 4 distinct eras. We'll hit the classic 3, move into modern colorful innovations, step back for some old world masterpieces, and wrap up with the craft chocolate revolution. This is going to help us understand exactly how we ended up with the unbelievable varieties sitting on store shelves today.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the classic 3, the building blocks of chocolate. We really have to begin with the foundational trinity, dark, milk, and white. And we're starting with the most ancient, intense, and pure of the bunch.
Here's a look at dark chocolate. To legally be called dark chocolate, a bar has to contain at least 50% cacao solids. Though, if you look at premium versions, they can push all the way to a staggering 99%. That percentage is basically just telling you how much of the bar comes from the actual bean versus added sugar. Now what about that ultra-smooth texture we all know and love? Well, you can thank 19th century Belgian chocolatiers for that. They invented this long grinding process called conching, which refines the chocolate for hours, or sometimes literally days.
And that long grinding process, it actually paved the way for our next classic, milk chocolate. Now, creating milk chocolate was a massive historical hurdle. Back in 1867, a Swiss chocolatier named Daniel Peter started experimenting. But get this, he spent 8 painful years tossing out spoiled batch after spoiled batch because the water in the milk just kept causing the mixture to separate. It was a disaster. It wasn't until 1875 that he partnered up with his neighbor, and that neighbor happened to be a guy named Henri Nestlé, who had just invented powdered milk. Together, they finally nailed a stable milk chocolate recipe.
Looking at the breakdown here, it's pretty fascinating. By law, in most countries, milk chocolate really only needs 10% cacao solids and 12% milk solids. But here is a super fun fact for you. If you're eating American milk chocolate, you've probably noticed a unique kind of sour tang, right? Well, that's because Hershey originally used partially lipolyzed milk. It was a special processing technique used to preserve the milk back before refrigeration was a common thing. And that tangy flavor profile became so wildly popular that it's actually the standard American chocolate taste today.
Okay, moving on to the third classic. We've got to ask a highly controversial question. Is white chocolate actually chocolate? I mean, when Nestle first introduced it commercially with the Galac bar over in Europe in 1930, purists fiercely debated this for decades. They flat out refused to acknowledge it as real chocolate.
In fact, the debate dragged on for so long that it wasn't until the year 2004, yes, 2004, that the FDA officially recognized white chocolate as actual chocolate.
And the reason for all that massive controversy is right here. White chocolate contains absolutely 0 brown cacao solids. Technically speaking, it relies entirely on cocoa butter, which is the pure fat extracted from the bean. Now, because cocoa butter melts perfectly at human body temperature, it provides this unbelievable luxurious mouthfeel. Plus, it acts as a brilliant, totally neutral canvas for chocolatiers to carry delicate flavors like vanilla, matcha, or freeze-dried fruit.
To meet legal standards, it's got to contain at least 20% cocoa butter and 14% milk solids. Honestly, it is notoriously tricky for chocolatiers to mold and shape because of that super low melting point we just talked about. But that strict composition is exactly what guarantees that luxurious, creamy texture.
Let's move right along to Section 2, Modern Colorful Innovations. Pink and gold. Now this is where the story gets really fun. We're going to see how modern science and, honestly, a few very happy accidents created entirely new categories of chocolate that go way beyond those classic 3.
First up is ruby chocolate. When the Swiss chocolatier Barry Callebaut announced this back in 2017, it was a monumental breakthrough. Listen to this. It took 13 straight years of research and development to figure out how to process specific ruby cacao beans from Ecuador, Brazil, and the Ivory Coast, all without fermentation. The result is a naturally pink chocolate with a tart, kind of sour flavor that reminds you of red berries or citrus. And the craziest part? There's literally not a single drop of added fruit or food coloring in the whole shebang. Legally, it sits right between milk and dark chocolate, requiring a minimum of 47.3% cocoa products.
So, while Ruby took 13 years of deliberate, intense focus, our next category, blonde chocolate, well, that was a complete accident. Back in 2006, a French pastry chef named Frédéric Bao accidentally left his white chocolate in a warm water bath for way too long. But instead of burning, it triggered what's called the Maillard reaction. That's the exact same chemical process that happens around 120 degrees Celsius to perfectly brown searing meat or toast your morning bread.
And this comparison brilliantly illustrates the result. The Maillard reaction completely transformed the milky, sweet proteins of the white chocolate into something entirely new. It became a golden caramelized chocolate with these rich, toasty flavor notes of shortbread and salted caramel. It was eventually commercialized by Valrhona under the name Dulce. It literally tastes like a perfect, dreamy cross between white chocolate and butterscotch.
All right, Section 3. Old World Masterpieces. History you can taste. We're going to leave those bright modern kitchens behind and jump back in time to explore some historic chocolates that actually survived centuries of shifts, wars, and blockades.
Take a look at this side-by-side comparison. Over in Sicily, the town of Modica makes chocolate using this incredible, rustic 16th century recipe that the Spanish brought straight over from the Aztecs. Now, unlike modern chocolate that's conched for hours until the sugar dissolves into this perfectly smooth melting pool, Modica chocolate is processed completely unconched, and they do it at temperatures that never exceed 40 degrees Celsius. Because of that low heat, the sugar crystals stay entirely intact. So biting into a bar of Modica chocolate, especially when it's infused with traditional cinnamon or chili pepper, it feels almost like eating a deliciously flavored, crumbly stone. It's wild.
Then we have Gianduja, which is an absolute glorious testament to culinary problem solving. During the Napoleonic Wars, a British blockade made cacao incredibly scarce and super expensive in Italy. So chocolatiers in turn decided to stretch their dwindling supply by mixing in 30% ground Piedmont hazelnut paste. And boom, this created an incredibly smooth, spreadable texture born entirely out of wartime necessity. And then history repeated itself. After World War II, shortages caused a second boom. This exact hazelnut chocolate blend went on to inspire the invention of Nutella.
And we absolutely cannot talk about history without mentioning that for the vast, vast majority of human existence, chocolate wasn't a solid bar at all. It was actually a luxurious, thick beverage. The Mayans drank it cold, bitter, and spiced up with chili peppers. Then the Spanish brought it to Europe in the 1500s, added sugar, served it piping hot, and it absolutely exploded as a luxury drink for aristocrats. Today, we still see echoes of this rich history in the incredibly thick French chocolat chaud, the Spanish tradition of dipping churros, and that totally decadent Viennese style topped with whipped cream.
Finally, we reach Section 4, the craft chocolate revolution, terroir and temperature. This is the era where modern producers are starting to treat cacao with the exact same geographical reverence that fancy sommeliers give to a fine wine. The absolute crucial takeaway here is single-origin chocolate. It proves that terroir, the specific soil, the climate, the local environment, it absolutely matters. Take Chuao in Venezuela, for example. It's this tiny village, accessible only by boat, producing just 20 tons a year. But it is widely considered some of the finest cacao in the entire world. Compare that to the distinctly fruity and acidic beans from Madagascar, or the highly prized floral notes of Ecuador's national cacao. When you mass blend beans from everywhere, you completely lose these incredible, distinct personalities.
The craft movement in the 2000s also brought about a revival of raw chocolate. Traditional chocolate requires roasting beans at super high heat. We're talking up to 140 degrees Celsius to develop those smooth flavors and, of course, kill off bacteria. But raw chocolate sacrifices that smooth flavor. Instead, the beans are kept strictly under 42 degrees Celsius to preserve their natural enzymes and antioxidants. The result? A much more bitter, astringent bite, and sometimes a significantly grittier texture because low temperatures make grinding so much harder. It really is an intense, completely unadulterated way to experience cacao.
So whether it's a 16th century rustic recipe that crumbles like stone, a 13-year scientific breakthrough that turns chocolate naturally pink, or just a happy accident left in a warm water bath, the evolution of chocolate proves there's always more magic waiting to be unlocked from the cacao pod. It really leaves us with a fascinating thought. As we continue to push the boundaries and treat cacao with such incredible respect, what amazing, completely untapped flavor might we discover next? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, next time you unwrap a chocolate bar, just remember the thousands of years of history sitting right there in the palm of your hand.